we're ready to go.
All right. You know, one of the things I learned about a long time ago, and I've been doing disaster work for a long, long time, is that disasters is really a series of communication. It really is. You start talking about it beforehand, you start talking about it through it, and you keep talking about it long after. So if you think about that, we're going to have a discussion and communication, and the way we get through serious emergencies and serious disasters is to keep talking. Because if anything flattens the playing field, it's a disaster, it's an emergency. And so we are all in it together when we talk about that. But our session today, glad you're here. Our session today is, we're talking about hurricane season 2022 with a focus on what's still going on in long-term recovery. So I want to thank our fellows. I'm Karen Hagan. I work for the Agency for Persons with Disabilities as the Emergency Coordination Officer, and every state agency has an Emergency Coordination Officer. So just so you know that we come together throughout the disaster cycle. Michael, you want to?
Sure. And my name's Michael Taylor, and I serve as the Suncoast Region Operations Manager, also with the Agency for Persons with Disabilities.
Hi, I'm Shannon Hagan. I work for the Florida Division of Emergency Management. I'm the Deputy State Individual Assistance Officer, so that's the individual, the people side of disasters. That's what my team does.
And my name is Dr. Kristen Karenko. I'm the agency Senior Behavior Analyst, and I have the pleasure and the honor of being requested as a guest speaker among my colleagues here about mental health, disaster and mental health. Thank you.
So, my next question, and Daniel, you've already shared with us that you lived in Charlotte County after Hurricane Ian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody else, were you affected by Hurricane Ian?
Charlotte as well.
Oh, okay. Or does anyone else know someone who was affected by Hurricane Ian or Nicole? Probably most of us. So we're going to kind of look at what happened last hurricane season and talk about what it means for us for the future and what the lessons learned are. But the important thing about lessons learned, often we think about them as, oh, what did government learn about this? They can do better the next time. When it's really, what did our community learn that we can do better? Linda is one of our regional operations manager in the Panhandle, and she learned an awful lot herself about, after Hurricane Michael, both personally, the community did, government did. So lessons learned is a very personal thing, as well as a lesson learned on the part of the helping agencies, if you will. So think about it in that, if you can we'll go through this in that regard. So if you think about the 2022 hurricane season, it's the same, it's still June 1st to November 30th. Do hurricanes affect, do they happen before June 1st? Sometimes. Do they happen after November 30th? Sometimes. But this is still the official hurricane season. It was in 2022, it's going to be in 2023. There were 16 tropical cyclones, 14 intensified into named storms. Everybody always wants to know what's the name of the storm. Of those, 8 became hurricanes. 2 reached major hurricane intensity. And if you've looked at any of the projections by the meteorologists at the Hurricane Center, you'll know that these are kind of the words that they used. How many do you think are going to be named storms? How many are going to be hurricanes? How many are going to be major hurricanes, which is a category 3 or stronger? And so here's this is last year. So you see this, and it really was not a very busy hurricane season. It was not, and we don't expect this next year to be. But as you all hear, it only takes one. We think about Ian and Nicole, and you can see the path of Ian. Of course, we know that it was expected to hit the Tampa Bay area, but it didn't. It came in much farther south, which caused some people not to evacuate who should have. And all of those stories, they're individualized stories. Everybody will have a story. And if you ever have the opportunity, it's really, really nice to listen to those stories that people have. Fiona, the only reason I'm mentioning Fiona, it was a very serious hurricane that affected Puerto So all of those folks have stories about that too, but I just wanted to, look at the 2022 hurricane season. And so I want to talk a little bit about sheltering and feeding, because that's the first thing people think about from a safety perspective is, what's really going on. And in Florida, you probably do know, we have two kinds of shelters. We have general population shelters and we have special needs shelters. Hi. And now there are some other shelters that pop up. There's recovery shelters, there's all kinds of things. But the big planning that occurs in any given community and planning that the state works on all the time are either the general population or the special needs shelters. At peak, after Hurricane Ian, and this is just an idea of, I wanted to share with you some stats. There were 256 general population shelters with 70,390 individuals sheltered. There were 63 special needs shelters open across the state with 4,209 individual shelters, 1,744 staff, and then 48 service animals, and they were all dogs. As you know, service animals can only be either dogs or miniature ponies. These were all dogs. There were no ponies in any of the shelters.
So that would have been interesting.
And before I get into the food and water, I do want to share some things with you. Michael was sharing with me about Lee County and how they really expected about 75,000 people to go to their general population shelters, yet only 35,000 went. Now, why? I don't know. It could be that people found a better place to go. Shelters are not where we want to go. If we can at all prevent ourselves from going to a shelter, we should. Friends, relatives, outside the affected area, etc. So I would like to think that people in Florida are finding to do and that they've planned ahead. So I'd like to look at that statistic as a very positive thing. And in only 30%, here's another important thing when we think about the special needs shelters, the people in Lee County that went to the special needs shelters, only 30% of them had pre-registered. Now the problem with that for county planners, whether it's the Department of Health or Emergency Management, is they can't plan for the kind of services that they might need to bring to bear. So for a special needs shelter, if that is a place that you would want to go to, it's important to register first of all. Every single county emergency management website and even health department website provides you with the opportunity to pre-register for the special needs shelter. And another reason that's so important is that they can look at it, the folks that work in the health department and emergency management, they work together in this. And they can either accommodate you or not. And if they can't, you need to know that beforehand so that you can find another place to go. Because one thing I can tell you is every county in the state has different capacity. Different capacity for general population sheltering, different capacity for special needs sheltering. And that's capacity from staffing to supplies to transportation. I can go on, and that's why pre-registering every single year, if that is your option, is so critically important. And it's really important for the planners in the community to know who's thinking that they might avail themselves of one of those shelters as well. So just really, really important. And so tell your friends and family far and wide that if that is one of the options that they're going to think about. Now, as far as feeding, huge feeding mission. When you think about over 4 million hot meals, over 15 million MREs, meals ready to eat, over 500,000 food boxes, and over 2 million cleanup and hygiene kits. That's a lot. That's a lot of feeding, and it went on for a long time, long past when the shelters closed. Why? Because some people decided, you know what, I'm going to go back home. I know I don't have power. I want to be in my home, or I'm going to stay in my home. Hopefully their home was still habitable. I'm going to stay in my home. Well, we have got the most amazing agencies that do feeding. They're faith-based, they're nonprofit, they come from around Florida, they come from around the country. In some cases, they come from other countries. And they do all of this, and they went and they did both fixed feeding sites and mobile feeding sites, and they fed people who decided to stay in their communities and stay in their home. And so it was a very, very robust feeding mission, and we see that a lot every year in Florida. I would say that Florida is one of the states that has probably one of the greatest capacities, wouldn't you agree, when it comes to mass care, which is sheltering and feeding. So let's go to the next slide and just talk about some of the essential, this is just high level. Michael's gonna touch on a couple of these things a little bit more detail, but I just wanted to give you some high level. And again, knowing your community, every single community, there's 67 counties, they're all different. Knowing what your county resources are, how many shelters are going to open? What are the transportation systems? Some counties don't even have much of a transportation system, but some do, very robust. And in fact, in some counties, when you pre-register for a special needs shelter, one of the questions is, do you have transportation needs? And in some counties, if you say yes, they will come and pick you up. But not all counties are the same, which is why it's so important to go to your county website and pre-register and see what their plans are and what their support systems are for you. Knowing where the evacuation routes are, getting in your car and driving them. Driving around, finding out where the evacuation routes are. You'll usually find them on those county websites. And knowing how to get out of town if you have to, and not get out of town if you don't have to. Michael's gonna talk a little bit about when to stay and when to go. Increase efforts of door to door. Okay, let me talk about this second one. One of the things we learned is how important neighbor helping neighbor is, how important going door to door is after a devastating storm like Hurricane Ian, where we didn't have as many people in shelters as we thought, where perhaps people didn't evacuate far and wide as much as we thought. Well, where are they? They stayed home, and are they okay? And the neighbor helping neighbor, you'd like to think that it would be more of a formalized approach than less, but sometimes it just came out of the kindness of people's hearts, and they just went door to door. In APD, one of the relationships we have is the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. They're law enforcement folks, and they're boots on the ground, and right after, they can get into areas that other people can't, and they go and check on every one of our group homes, every one, and they fill out a sheet and they send it to us so that we know who's in there, what's the condition of the group home, what's going on, and so we can act on it, and that's a wonderful partnership to have. And then we saw all kinds of groups coming out to do that, and what's important is that they have the opportunity, the groups that do door to door, to report it back to, I'm gonna guess, the county emergency management office is where they probably come back and report it back to. So that's one of the lessons learned, really, really important to have. Accessible transportation, remember I told you the big, the robust feeding effort? Well, accessible transportation to feeding sites and disaster recovery centers, or anywhere that feeding occurred, again, fixed sites, some mobile sites, was really, really important. People shouldn't be not fed because they can't get to a place that is feeding. Again, good, important information to feed back to county emergency management. And then awareness of available services as they come online. What we see, and one of the lessons we learn, is that people they'll listen to the radio, maybe they have TV, most of the time not. They'll learn about something that occurs, and then they don't learn again. They don't go back to the source to find out, okay, what now is going on? And so it's important every single day, whether it's for you or someone you care about, to go however you get your information. Could be social media, could be radio, however you get your information, and go back every single day, because especially in a storm like Hurricane Ian, to a lesser degree Hurricane Nicole, the services that are brought online more and more every single day, and it's ever changing. Where the mobile feeding routes is changing, the different FEMA programs that come online are changing because the approval for these services changes. Most of them are based on need and the statistics that we've gathered. So a lot of these programs that come online, community programs, state programs, federal programs, are based upon the statistics that they're being fed. That's why telling people how you're doing, how your community is so, so important, because it will help support programs that you might not get otherwise. And Shannon's gonna talk about the long-term recovery programs that are still going on. So I put this slide up. What this is, it's a slide of every county in Florida, all 67, and what counties are using, like the dark turquoise, using the statewide special needs registry. Remember, you register for special needs shelter. Not using the registry, but they'll upload the information from the registry, and then, or a hybrid model. You know, they might plan for it and they might, you know, do certain things, but they're customized in the county. Or then the green is where migration, meaning we're gonna start to use the registry. It makes sense for our county.
That's where I am.
Yeah. Now, I can tell you that Alachua County, for example, since I got this slide from the Department of Health, they're already migrating to the special needs registry. So this is gonna be an ever-changing map. But I just share it to prove the point that every county is different and everybody has a responsibility to go to their own county's website, county emergency management website, Lee County Emergency Management, Charlotte County Emergency Management. Often, especially in the midst of hurricane season, just go on there and look, see what's going on, see the preparedness messaging. And really, preparedness messaging is pretty similar across the state, because it's the same kind of preparedness activities we all need to, but every county is different with the resources and all the other things we were talking about. So that's why I had that slide up, because I think it just kind of proves the point of every county has different capacity. And we thought it was important to speak about disaster mental health. You know, there's a lot of adults in the United States, obviously, they suffer from some type of mental health issue or mental illness. But if going around from the right, you know, victims of, and this is studies done over time, victims of natural disasters, they're at an increased risk of depression, you know, or post-traumatic stress disorder, you know, and this is proven. 25 to 50% of the people exposed to an extreme weather disaster are at risk of adverse mental health effects. If you think about it, and you were in Charlotte County, that feeling of helplessness is so, and you were in after Hurricane Mom, is so scary, because you think you've got it all in order and then you're helpless, and that does something to people. Dr. K is going to talk a little about what can we do about that. But these statistics are important. Up to 54% of adults and 45% of children suffer depression after a natural disaster. It's normal, it's expected, it's unfortunate. 49% of the survivors of Hurricane Katrina, we don't have the studies yet for Hurricane Ian, but 49% of the survivors of Hurricane Katrina developed an anxiety or mood disorder, and 1 in 6 developed post-traumatic stress disorder. You know, those are scary and significant statistics. And then think about this, the anniversary of disasters could trigger an uptick in mental health crises for survivors. These are realities. This isn't just because somebody is weak or anything like that. You know, this is reality, and we have a responsibility to ourselves and those that we care about to understand that this is real. And so, Dr. K, if I can turn it to you,
Sure.
Just talk a little bit about what to do.
Sure. First of all, thank you all for being here, and I love the fact that this is in a circle. And please don't feel isolated, you all, okay? All right. First and foremost, you need to recognize that your reaction to any mental health challenge or any disaster is a typical reaction to an abnormal situation. You know, unfortunately, since 1992, we have seen more hurricane and tornadic activity down here in this area of the country. So it has become something that's been, you frequently experienced rather than something like 20, 30. I'm aging myself now, 40 or 50 years ago, okay? And I remember, I grew up in South Florida, and I remember when I drove down to Tallahassee the first time, driving some trucks down to this one particular agency, and driving through Broward County and then getting to Dade after Hurricane Andrew hit. It was demoralizing to me. And I was coming, I didn't experience that particular hurricane head on, first on. I was coming to the area. Grief, trauma, loss is experienced in waves a lot of times. So for example, you have folks who may be primarily experiencing it right there in the thick of things, and then it bubbles out, and then you go through these experiences, and everybody has a different experience. A tip, recognize that. Recognize if you are experiencing anything that's a break from your normal routines, your typical emotions or reactions. Folks that are experiencing some type of loss or change, you may typically feel a little frustrated and maybe quick to anger, quick to respond than what you typically, your normal kind of status quo in terms of your reaction. Recognize that. 2, ask for help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. And how do you go about getting that help? Well, first off, you're here, right? This is not a therapy session, okay?
Wait a minute.
I promise you it's not, okay? You're not gonna get a bill, all right? Okay? But in terms of recognizing that change, you know what? I really don't enjoy these things that I typically do. You know, if I wanna go bowling, if I wanna go sing karaoke, if I wanna go be with friends, and then, no, you know, I think I wanna kinda just be by myself. Recognize that. And check it. Check it in yourself. And for those folks that are in the caretaker role, check it with the folks that you're taking care of. You know, I remember talking with our group of staff across the state, how are you doing? And when I ask, I'm not just trying to be nice, right? It's how are you doing? Really get the opportunity to really have a dialogue, and then assess and pivot, okay? You remember that meme of Ross from Friends with pivot? If you need that mental picture in your head to really remember that, it's okay, what do I need to pivot to? Well, there's a lot of resources. First and foremost, if your anxiety is really high, if you're thinking of doing something to yourself, you see the statistics on self-harm and suicide, 988. 988 is a crisis line that you can call from a landline, from a cell phone. You can access it via line or via online on their website, and it's staffed by counselors round the clock, 24/7, 365, that will listen and help point you in the right direction of resources. Also, if you have an employee assistance program, an EAP, you can access services and supports that way. Not just counseling, but something as you might think as benign as childcare, right? If you've got to go to a disaster recovery center for services and supports, and you have that employee assistance program benefit, that may help support you in terms of what you need to do to get back to that level of your typical routine that you really need to reestablish. And then you can reach out to any of us at any time. Hey, I need to know where to go with this. I'm at my wit's end. I really need to just talk to somebody. Something as simple as Halloween candy. When I worked at the Sarasota, we had Halloween candy. And there was a child that came in that day to the disaster recovery center, and he walked up, and I remember Jeanette, Candace, and I were there. And he reached in, he had a Darth Vader, because I remember the costume too, okay? And he's just looking there, and he takes off his mask, and he says, "Thank you." And I said, "For what? For what, honey?" Because that's how I talk to kids, okay? "For what?" And he says, "Thank you for giving me Halloween candy. That's like restores my faith in humanity." That's the message that I heard, but Mom said, "It's normal. us returning to normal. Something as benign as Halloween, you know, we may take for granted. Just some things to think about. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share
Thank you.
that. Thank you.
Appreciate that so much. So Michael is gonna, talk about what APD, what our role is in disaster and, amongst other things. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Michael.
Sure. And as Karen mentioned, you know, our role at APD is really based in communication, to facilitate communication coming down out of the emergency operations centers in Tallahassee and getting that out to the service providers. And before I go further, I want to take a minute to acknowledge the waiver service providers. Time and time again, the folks that provide services day in and day out, when the stakes are high, whether we're talking hurricanes or we're talking COVID, they always meet the challenges. Really a tremendous group of folks that go above and beyond, bring folks into their home. We've seen that happen numerous occasions to keep folks healthy and safe and get through the emergency, and work in collaboration with us. So when I talk about APD's role, I want to do so in the context of how can we support the individuals, you know, and those service providers that are doing that work day in and day out, because they're really a tremendous group. And I think it makes sense to think of it as in the term of living settings and how those providers support in each of the living settings that we serve. Everyone on the waiver has a waiver support coordinator. They're really that key person as far as services go, especially for folks that are living in the family home. They're talking to those families, making sure those families are developing their own plan, developing their supplies. If they're evacuating, talking with them about where they may be going. Really, the family has the lead role, as of course, as the family. But that support coordinator is there to lend support, and if there are questions or issues that they're being asked, we're available to field those and provide guidance. The next living setting is independent living, and those are individuals that live in the community, whether it's their own apartment, their own home, a mobile home, a townhome, or a condo, but they're living so without a supported living coach, which I'll talk about supported living in a moment. So that means they have a limited amount of paid support in their lives. So that support coordinator plays a vital role to make sure that individual, in absence of some of those paid supports, has a plan in place that knows what they're going to do if they have to evacuate. Perhaps they would be using a shelter, but we really encourage to develop relationships with natural supports. Maybe they attend a church, or their family members, or to talk to other service providers and develop host homes. Before I joined APD, I was a supported living coach and a service provider, and that was a model that we always tried to use whenever we could. Really, it was good to have folks cohabitate, to be together. We heard about the anxiety and how scary that all is. If you're by yourself, you know, that even more so. So if we could partner 2 or 3 or more folks together, they could share resources. It wasn't quite as expensive to get all of those supplies together, and they could support each other. And certainly from a service provider's point of view, it's easier to provide services and keep folks healthy and safe if they're all in one spot, as opposed to all spread out and having a different plan and being in a shelter or another setting. So that support coordinator really plays a key role with those in the family home and independent living. The next living setting is supported living, and that's the same as independent living, other than there is a supported living coach that's involved in that case. That individual has chosen that coach to be part of their service array, and they have the lead role with emergency management and disaster planning for that individual. Right from the very beginning of where they're choosing to live, that supported living coach should be looking at, is this an evacuation zone? If it is, you know, would we be able to have a plan in place? Because maybe that's not a good living setting to choose if that individual maybe doesn't have a strong family or natural support setting. Maybe they should look at an area of the town where they wouldn't have to evacuate. So right from the beginning, that supported living coach needs to be thinking along those lines and providing support and guidance to the individual so that they're developing that plan to enact once that disaster hits. And then lastly is an APD licensed group home, and that's quite different than the other living settings we've talked about. Each year, that licensed home has to go through a re-licensure process to renew their license for the next year. And part of that renewal process is to present their emergency management plan for review. At a minimum, it's reviewed by APD. Some counties in the state also require that plan to be submitted to them for review. And what that plan may not include is use of a public shelter. So as a homeowner of that licensed home, they have to come up with a plan and hopefully a backup plan to that plan of where they're going to go should they have to evacuate. During Ian, we saw a lot of situations where providers developed partnerships with other providers and they combined homes. This worked really well from a mental health standpoint too. As we heard a lot of stories of, it was kind of treated like a kind of an adventure that weekend where, before the storm hit, they had a barbecue and played board games and kind of made it a fun event to kind of tap down that anxiety that folks were feeling about being displaced from their home. Other providers had arrangements with Airbnbs and hotels. Others owned other group homes around the state as they're part of a larger network. So they would evacuate to homes in other counties that weren't as impacted. But those are the kind of things that we're wanting to see when we look at their emergency plan each year before we renew that license for the next year. And Karen mentioned, I wanted to give a thank you as well to the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. In Suncoast region where I work, there are 556 licensed group homes in the 11 county region. And it is beyond our capability to go to all 556 group homes and check on them immediately after the storm. But that's exactly what the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit did. They went door to door within a very short period of time and submitted a written report to us of who they talked to, what was going on in that home, was there damage, was there flooding, had people evacuated, which would make sense. We'd get a report and say, well, yes, their plan was to evacuate here, so then we could call and follow up and make sure that they're there. That part was really in our wheelhouse, where each of those group homes, they have a licensing specialist attached to that home, so they would call and follow up and make sure that they were able to enact their evacuation plans or their disaster plans. But the ability from Medicaid Fraud to visit those homes was tremendously valuable and just a great partnership. So really what kicks things into high gear is when there's an emergency declaration. Once Charlotte County or Lee County or Leon County, once that disaster has been declared, that really kicks the communication into high gear. From an APD standpoint, we start hosting daily calls, twice daily, 12:30 and 6:30, to go over the situation in each of the counties in which we serve. We're communicating all that emergency. At the beginning, it's very weather dominant as we're all watching the storm, and then once the storm hits, we're starting to send out all that emergency information on where there are resources, where are those points of distributions being stood up so that folks can get water and other supplies. That all starts once that emergency declaration is issued. So on those daily calls, we're receiving that information back from support coordinators and supported living coaches and licensed homes, so that we can report back up to our leadership in Tallahassee the conditions in those counties and where we may need to assist. One thing I failed to mention for supported living that we do in the Suncoast region is we have a project that we call All Ready, All Clear. And each spring we ask all of the supported living providers to send us a staff listing of who their staff are, in which counties they work, and who they're serving. That way we kind of have a basic idea of where folks are and who their supported living coach is. So that way, if we're trying to find folks after an event, we have a good starting point of who's that coach, where does that person live, and we have a basic idea of their plan. They may say with family or, you know, sheltering at home. So we have a basic idea. Again, specific to Suncoast, we have about 1,200 individuals that live in supported living settings with that coach. So you can imagine it becomes challenging to keep track of where everyone is. And having those coaches send us those lists, it's not mandatory or required in rule, but we have a very good cooperation from them. I think they see the value in, you know, the more information they can give us, the better we can support them after an event. And then post-event, we ask them to please send us an all clear and tell us that they've located everyone that they serve and that everyone is safe, and whether they're back in their home or whether they're temporarily displaced. And that's been a very effective program that we've used. That's been very helpful. The way that we record the status for everyone is we use what's called a situation report. And when we're having those daily calls with Tallahassee, we turn in this situation report, which really up in the corner is the name of the event and the date. These are due first thing in the morning and then again in the evening. The region, who the contact is. Notice I didn't include my phone number. Happy to give it. And then we organize things by county. You know, is that county under evacuation order? How many folks are in supported living or independent living in that county? How many have been contacted? Again, we're communicating with those direct service providers and relying on them to contact the folks they serve. And then how many licensed group homes are in that county? How many have they contacted? And we do contact every single group home when there's been an emergency declared in their county. And then how many have they evacuated? And then if they've evacuated, where have they gone? And we keep track of them while they're displaced, and hopefully they're home soon. We did see, you know, folks pretty significantly impacted in Charlotte, Lee, down to Collier. We had about 30 homes that evacuated. 11 sustained what we would say major damage, you know, where they were out of the home for several months, dealing with, you know, having to have walls and floors and significant repairs in order for the folks to get back into the home. The last home returned in March. They were able to get back into their home and be whole. So other than one home in Cape Coral that was unfortunately completely destroyed, I'm happy to say that all 546 other homes are back in their home with everyone healthy and safe, no lives lost or anything like that. So I think that communication that Karen talked about at the beginning really is essential, that, you know, we get all the information out to the folks that are doing the direct service, and then we're listening to them very intently on what's going on with them so that we can then report back up. We had some very unusual circumstances happen. A gentleman who used a power wheelchair was dropped off at a special needs shelter, and that shelter couldn't accommodate him. He didn't have a caregiver with him. He wasn't able to transfer in and out of his chair or use the restroom on his own. So quickly we learned of the situation. We called some group homes up in Pinellas County that could accommodate a power chair. They said absolutely. You know, now the issue was to get him there, and we worked with Karen and her team in Tallahassee. They got that message up to the Emergency Operations Center. Transport was found. They went down, got the gentleman, brought him up to the group home where he stayed for, I think it was less than a week, and then he was able to return to his home. So sometimes those communications are broad. Other times we have one guy who needs our assistance because he's in an unsafe spot. You know, he's in a spot where they can't meet his needs. And we worked through several of those, and that level of communication to me is our greatest strength. You know. So essential pre-storm activities. As we go through more and more of these storms, we learn the importance of really paying attention to what the local officials are telling us. I was able to go to the governor's hurricane conference this year. One of the things I took away from that was a presentation by the National Hurricane Center. I think I got that right. And he talked about, you know, on the news and the media, you see all the spaghetti models and the cones of probability, but to really try to push through that and focus on where are they issuing watches and warnings, because that's the important part. You know, we shelter from the wind, but we evacuate from the water. And that's what we really want to hone in on, not the 8 different spaghetti models, but which counties are they saying are going to have a storm surge, and how big is that storm surge? And then where am I? You know, if I'm in an evacuation zone, you know, that says I'm okay for 10 feet, if they're predicting higher than that, I need to start to strongly consider evacuating from my home. You know, we saw pictures from Ian of folks, you know, that all of a sudden had 10 plus feet of water in their living room. And there were late changes in that storm, you know, in communication concerns, but that's really the part to focus on. So really sticking with your local media and what is being issued in your county. Of course, having a plan is number one. You're fine, it's okay. Having a plan is number one. You know, we've got to have a plan. And if you must evacuate, knowing where you're going would be a top priority. We've seen some horror stories on the news of folks that it takes 20 hours to get out of Florida. You know, we're in a long state. You know, and if you're hitting the road from Lee County, it could be 20 hours before you're crossing the border into Georgia. And if you're really evacuating from the storm surge, there may be no need to go all the way out of the state. And what you're going to find on the road is a lot of other people evacuating and difficulties finding gas. People are going to be tired, stressed, in terrible moods, so you're going to get some road rage going on. You really may be giving yourself more stress and more burden than what's absolutely necessary. So it's really evacuating from that storm surge that is key. In supplies, I think we're all pretty familiar with, you know, having the 3 to 7 days of food and water and medications and those things. That seems to be about the timeline when we start seeing those things become available again in our local communities. Certainly if you're in a rural community, that could be a bit longer, and you'd want to have that as a consideration as you're making your plans. And knowing who will be with you and keeping your contact list up to date. If we're being responsible, we're thinking about these things early spring, but things may change in September or October when that storm comes rolling through. So as you start seeing those weather warnings, that's the time to revisit, you know, have you added someone who's going to be with you during the storm, or maybe that person now has a medical need that they didn't have in February when you were discussing this. And really having this be a year-round education and outreach. Not to speak for emergency management, but when I did my internship there, no one was visiting outside of hurricane season, you know, and they really would have welcomed folks to call or schedule an appointment and come in and say, here's my situation, you know, and they're happy to help you work through those. Once there's a hurricane watch, that's not going to be possible to do. So doing it on a nice blue sky day when there's no threats of bad weather is the perfect time to reach out to your county emergency manager if you have questions or concerns about what your plan's going to be.
I have a question. I mean, it always says have 2 weeks worth of medication, which, as you all know, Medicaid isn't going to give you extra medication. And I have 6 children with enormous lists of medication. What do you do? I mean, 5 are on seizure medicines. I can't run out of that, but I also don't have a surplus of that.
Well, when the emergency is declared.
Yeah, so when, at the state level, so there's different levels of emergency declaration. There's a local state of emergency, a state emergency declaration, and then the president can also issue a major emergency declaration. But at the state level, when the governor issues an emergency activation, it does allow for pharmacies to give up to 30 days, I believe, worth of prescriptions. That is only activated when the disaster is approaching, but to keep an eye out for when that happens, and then talk to your local pharmacy, and say, I'm aware that this has now been activated and I would like to request my 30-day supply of medication at this time.
Okay.
So that's, and if you're signed up for your local, whatever county you live in, a lot of counties will have communication systems that you can sign up for, and a lot of times they'll distribute that information. We also push it out on our state social media, emergency management social media platforms and networks. So keep an eye out for when that happens, because that's when that gets turned on.
Yeah, because that's the one thing that scares the death out of me.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, and that's why that was written into law several years
So
ago.
as soon
is
as
for
the
that.
state issues it,
Mhm.
okay, so that hopefully would be 24 to 48 hours out?
It's typically prior and always before the federal government would issue a disaster
Great, thank you.
declaration. Mhm.
Karen, could you speak on this slide?
I will. We have an emergency notification system where we have all of our clients, our staff, our providers in this system, and we can push out information about emergencies, but it's got a mapping component to it where, and this is just a picture of what it might look like. So if you think about all these dots, it might be a group home, it might be where a client lives, it might be a staff member, it might be a provider, and we can actually put a virtual circle around an affected area and show how many clients, how many staff, how many providers are in that area. Because if they are affected, and it doesn't have to be a hurricane, it could be a wildfire, it could be a flood, it could be any kind of an emergency, we can go in and say, hey, I'll just use Brevard County. They just had a little tornado, okay? Well, we did this. We put a circle around the area that was affected in Brevard County and showed that there were 22 clients affected, or they weren't affected, but they lived in that area. And it gave our regions the opportunity to say, go in and call them and say, are you okay? And so in a major event, in a hurricane event or whatever, we will continue to utilize this system. And so we use it not just for hurricanes. We use it almost every day, because in Florida, every day something happens somewhere. So it's a great way to show. I've had to send Linda more than I would like to, because she's so affected up in the Panhandle so often. So it's just very helpful. So that's what this slide is for.
Great, thank you. And then I'm gonna go through this rather quickly so that Shannon has ample time for her portion. We've really honed in on the ongoing communication to identify, unmet needs. We continued those twice daily calls from about a week before Ian hit at the end of September, and we wrapped them up right around Thanksgiving. So we really kept going until, we knew that everybody was on the right path, to recovery, to get back into their living settings. And the goal of that is to make sure that we're sharing all the information that's available as quickly as we can. It can be a lot. There can be 3 and 4 email blasts going out a day. So we also have on our APD Cares website a toolkit where we put all of the information that's been set out in one location, so that folks can go back if they've missed something or want to research something. It's all there on one web page for them to utilize. We continue those situation reports until all the folks are back into their homes, monitoring when they're displaced. APD had a presence in the disaster recovery centers as well. We were certainly pleased to serve in that role. And in them, we were with our partner agencies. Of course, FEMA was the main draw as folks were there to get individual FEMA assistance. But the Department of Health was there when folks lost their birth certificates. They were able to access them right on site. Department of Motor Vehicles was there when folks needed an ID, which you need to apply for FEMA. So there were a lot of folks there to get a brand new ID on site so that they can then go apply for maybe food stamps. All of the agencies really came together to try to be a one-stop location for someone that has really been impacted by that storm, whether they just maybe came in to get Red Cross assistance with meals and pallets of water. The support there was really tremendous, and we had a similar experience with the Halloween candy, and I set Ms. Coleman up, unfortunately, by I forgot to tell her when she came on shift, make sure you buy Halloween candy, and pitchforks and torches were out because Johnny rolled in without Halloween candy. But while, there were folks there that had just been through a terrible, tragic event, there was a lot of positivity in those resource centers as well, of folks happy to see each other and share their stories. And so we were very honored to be part of those disaster recovery centers and be part of helping folks get whole again. And then very briefly for regional lessons learned, of course our knowledge gets deeper for each of them. I think we've learned that redundancy is very important, having a plan, but then when that plan doesn't go as you think it's going to, what's the new plan? And being able to adjust, to new conditions is very, very important. I've talked with Karen some about, maybe APD looks at pre-identifying, staff that may be available and can be dispatched to a region. When Linda went through Hurricane Michael, the strain on staff is very, very real. So maybe that's the time that staff from Suncoast travel up and assist in the Panhandle or any region that we have. There may be a path where we can look and see how we can better support. In talking with our providers, fuel was certainly the biggest need. Many of the providers had generators, but maybe weren't prepared for how long they were going to need to fuel them. As soon as the supply chain started moving again, 75 flooded, which delayed things again. So it was kind of that backup plan. So there was a lot of scrambling to get fuel. And I think we could look at standardizing some of our reporting tools so that those support coordinators and supported living coaches and APD, we're all using the same tool and communicating in one decided manner. So with each event, we'll continue to grow and improve.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about state emergency management and then some of the long-term recovery, what we're still doing today after the 2022 hurricane season. So the State Emergency Response Team, or the CERT, is comprised of a lot of different partners at the state level, state agencies, as well as some other statewide nonprofits. The American Red Cross at the state level, Salvation Army, partners like that are all members of the CERT. And that team is tasked with providing disaster assistance to the residents of the state of Florida. It's comprised of branches and emergency support functions, or ESFs, who work really closely together to address mission tasks and requests for assistance, both from our county partners and what we're hearing from individuals on the ground when there are needs of a community. We work together as a state to try and meet those needs and support them. So APD is a part of the CERT. They're a part of Emergency Support Function 6, which is mass care, so feeding and sheltering, and then Emergency Support Function 8, health and medical services. And so that's Karen's role in the state EOC during a disaster. She'll come to the state EOC Emergency Operations Center. I'm sorry, it's a big room in Tallahassee where all of our partners collaborate with one another. So she's there representing the agency and assisting with those missions, and also in sharing information with the Agency for Persons with Disabilities. So the Florida Division of Emergency Management, where I work, we partner closely with FEMA before, during, and after disasters. We're still having daily communications with them. We have a joint field office established in the state of Florida with several branches continuing to work after the 2022 hurricane season. So they are our partners at the federal level. We also work closely with our county and our local partners, with county emergency managers. So we're sort of the bridge between the federal government and the local government, and then the local government works with their community members, and that's how we're all connected. So some of the programs that are still going on. First, I want to ask, has anyone, either this past hurricane season or in previous events, applied for FEMA individual assistance? Has anyone navigated that process? Well, it's a complicated process, I'll put it that way. So if you do ever have to navigate it, just be prepared. The federal government requests a lot of information from people, and it's at times difficult to understand what they're asking you for and how they want information shared. So there's been some talk of disaster recovery centers. My best piece of advice is, if you are impacted by a disaster, is to try and get to one of those centers, and you can work with a real live person. You can also work with other state agencies and other organizations that are there to support you, but particularly in navigating the FEMA individual assistance process, online that they have set up gets overwhelmed really quickly. And if you're using their online portal, it's helpful if you know how to navigate it, but if you don't understand exactly what they're asking you and you submit something incorrectly, it can really delay your the assistance that you receive. So I always recommend that people try and go to those centers once they're set up. But some of their programs, individual assistance programs, continue on. The first one I'll talk about is transitional sheltering assistance, or hotel stays, where FEMA puts individual households up in temporary hotels while they navigate their disaster recovery process. This is still going on. We requested extensions for this program based on the need, so we still have families staying in hotels funded by FEMA while they're trying to get back to their pre-disaster residence or relocate, whatever their situation might be. FEMA Direct Temporary Housing was also activated for this disaster. It's not turned on all the time, but this is what you've probably heard of FEMA trailers before, but this program is more than just trailers. They provide manufactured housing units, but they also can put people up in individual rental properties, and they also have a program called Multifamily Lease and Repair, where they actually will go in and repair damaged rental units and then put a dislocated family into those rental units. So that helps both landlords who may have damaged rental properties and families who need to be placed somewhere. So that program goes on 18 months after a disaster declaration, so we'll see that program continue for quite a while. The state's also doing some things at the state level this time that we've never done before, one of which is the State Non-Congregate Sheltering Program, or NCS. And so this is state-provided temporary housing, temporary sheltering using travel trailers. So it looks pretty similar to FEMA Direct Temporary Housing, but it's administered at the state level, and we've expanded our eligibility criteria to help support some families who maybe don't meet FEMA's criteria, but we as a state can potentially assist them where FEMA couldn't. We also have a limited home repair program. It's called SHARP, which stands for Sheltering at Home for Recovery Continuation. And this program is connecting homeowners whose homes were damaged, who may not have received FEMA assistance, or their insurance was not sufficient to meet their need. Maybe they were uninsured or underinsured, and we can connect them with volunteer organizations working in the state of Florida who may be able to come in and conduct home repairs for them. So this is for those most vulnerable homeowners who really need home repair assistance. So this is the first time we're doing this program, but it's been really successful so far, and we work really closely with Volunteer Florida, which is another state agency, to identify those volunteer groups and connect them with disaster survivors. Another program, which is funded federally but administered at the state level, is the Disaster Case Management Program. And this is one of my favorite programs. This is how I got my start in emergency management, as administering this program after Hurricane Irma. And this is really an individualized support system for disaster survivors. So it connects a household impacted by a disaster with a disaster case manager, who will work with them to develop an individualized recovery plan, look at all of their unmet needs after a disaster and what it's going to take for them to recover and become whole again. And they'll walk that journey with the survivor, and that's a 24-month program from the date of disaster declaration, so they really will stay with those survivors for a long time and make sure that their needs are met. Crisis Counseling Program is another program that's administered by the Department of Children and Families in the state of Florida, but this provides crisis counseling services, up to 2 sessions with a crisis counselor after disasters for those who are impacted. Their mental health has been impacted, and they really need to talk to someone to process what they've been through and set them up for what is to come. So that's a really great program that's still going on in the state of Florida. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about is long-term recovery groups. And so these are made up at the local level, the community level. Typically they're county-based. And they're made up of organizations and members of the community who want to work to provide survivors with necessary resources. So this can be a county housing authority who might have information on housing resources available in the county. It can be a nonprofit organization or a voluntary organization active in disasters who might have resources or furniture assistance, financial assistance, food assistance, and they'll all come together around what's called an unmet needs table, and they'll be able to work as well with individual disaster survivors, and everyone will kind of chip in, and a case manager may present a case and say, this household really needs their roof fixed, and they also need transportation assistance and food assistance, and different parties around the table may be able to say, well, I have a gas gift card that I can provide to this family, or we have a network with contractors that can come in and perform roof repairs for them. So those recovery groups are really critical, and they're made up of members of the community who have the most at stake because it's their own recovery they're navigating as well. So most counties have them in the state of Florida, and if you are a disaster survivor at any point in time, I would really try and reach out to your local county emergency manager or your local long-term recovery group because they'll be able to provide you with the most localized resources. And then some best practices and lessons learned, and I know that we're short on time, so I'll be quick here. I talked about this. If you're going to ever engage in the FEMA Individual Assistance Program, visiting a disaster recovery center is the best thing I can say. Not all individual assistance programs are turned on after a FEMA declaration. If we get a FEMA declaration, sometimes more localized events don't result in a major disaster declaration by the federal government. So it's really important to understand what programs are available from FEMA and what they're providing. The other thing I can say is if your situation changes, don't hesitate to go back to your application, either in person or going back onto that website and updating them. If you, maybe you're staying with friends and family for a period of time, but after a week they say, hey, I need you to find somewhere else to go, let FEMA know that you're now displaced and you don't have somewhere to go. Maybe you'll qualify for one of those hotel stays or for, direct temporary housing. There's a question on the FEMA application that a lot of people don't understand, and it asks, are you willing to relocate? And people hear that and they think, well, I don't want to move away. I want to come back home. Well, FEMA takes that question to mean, are you willing to temporarily leave your home? So the hotel stays and direct temporary housing, that's what triggers those. So if somebody says, no, I'm not willing to relocate, it can disqualify them for some of those really important programs. So when you see that question, understanding what it means, and going to a disaster recovery center and talking to someone, they can communicate those things to you, but that's one of the things that you might miss if you're just navigating it online. And then keep receipts for any expenses you purchase with FEMA funds. If FEMA provides you rental assistance, you can request continued rental assistance, but you need to be able to show FEMA that you spent the money they gave you on rent the first time around. If they don't know that you used that money for what they gave it to you for, you might not be able to get any more from them. So understanding how best to leverage those funds and keep it going for as long as you're in need of assistance. And then don't be afraid to appeal. Only 6% of people appeal their determinations from FEMA, which is a very low number. So if you feel like you need more than what FEMA's provided to you, you can appeal that decision. And there's resources and networks out there. There's nonprofit organizations and legal services that will assist you with FEMA appeals processes. It's your right as a FEMA applicant to be able to say that you disagree with their determination and seek additional assistance. And then the importance of maintaining insurance is something that we always like to stress in the state of Florida, especially flood insurance. And if you're a renter, renter's insurance for your belongings, because your landlord may be responsible for repairing the home itself, but you're responsible for all your belongings inside that home. And then again, to just make sure that you're tapped into your local emergency management office, the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service, if they're issuing warnings, making sure that you're keeping tabs on what those are saying so that you can be best prepared when a disaster hits. And so that's all for me. I'm going to turn it back over to Karen to close us out.
Thank you. So you can see there's a lot going on year-round in the world of emergency management, but it's all to help people recover, plan for, recover from emergencies. So I hope this was helpful to you. I know that again, it's a very individualized thing, but there's a whole community. There's a federal, state, and local community out there working together and working for you. So we thank you for sitting with us and having this conversation. It was wonderful. Appreciate it.